Public Safety Committee roll call. Legislator Zila Bino. Minority Leader Kavan Abraham. Ranking Member Laura Curran. Legislator Denise Ford. Legislator Vincent Muscarella. Vice Chairman Donald McKenzie. Chairman Dennis Dunn. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item to come before this committee, we might pair them with the second item because they're both with the district attorney's office. Items 586-16 and 589-16. They're both ordinances supplemental to the annual appropriations ordinance in connection with the district attorney's office. Both of them be the same exact. And we have Mr. McManus here, correct?
Bob McManus, District Attorney's Office.
Okay, there's a motion from Denise Ford, seconded by Legislator McKenzie. They're both on right now. And we'll do 586 first, please.
Yes. These appropriation, clerk item number 586 is for the motor vehicle theft and insurance fraud prevention grant, which we receive every year. This grant program finances the investigation and prosecution of motor vehicle theft and motor vehicle insurance fraud cases. Investigative efforts target medical mills and auto body shops suspected of no-fault fraud, with an emphasis on undercover investigations. The program also facilitates cooperation between the District Attorney's Office and the Police Department and the insurance industry in combating the problem of auto-related insurance fraud.
Are there any questions from any legislator on this? Are there any public comment? There being no other. Everybody in favor of 586-16? Please indicate by saying aye. Aye. And 589 is
589 supplemental appropriation request.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's for the Crimes Against Revenue program. Funds from this grant will be used by the District Attorney's Office for continuation of the Crimes Against Revenue program for the period January through December of 2017. This program supports focused investigation and prosecution of crimes that have adverse effects on all governmental revenues, including sales and personal income tax, tax evasion, Medicaid fraud, and violation of prevailing wage laws.
Excellent. Are there any questions from any legislator? Is there any public comment? If there be none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any against? It passes unanimous. Thank you so much, Mr. McManus.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is 599-16. It's an ordinance supplemental to the annual appropriations ordinance in connection with the police department. Motion by Legislator McKenzie, seconded by Legislator Ford. And
good afternoon, Lieutenant Greg Schaefer from the Police Department. Item 599 is a ordinance to appropriate $2 million in funds received from the U.S. Department of Justice from assets seized under the authority of the Federal Forfeiture Act. These funds have already been received and we'll appropriate them into our financial system for our use.
okay, are there any questions from any Legislator Curran?
Thanks. Will any of this money be used to defray overtime costs?
Yes, the salary part.
Oh, it will? And
Yes.
will all of it go towards that? Or how much is the salary covered?
Well, it depends. We haven't finished the year, but it depends on what we'll finish the year with.
Okay.
That we use from asset.
Okay, so that would be the 1.5
Yes.
of it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other legislator, any public comment? There being none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Excuse me. Legislator Bynum.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So this number varies from year to year, am I correct?
The amount yes, it depends on the cases worked and what's seized under the Federal Forfeiture Act.
Okay. And do you know what we received last year in comparison to this year?
I'd have to look back at the supplemental. Offhand, no.
Okay. I'd be interested to see the history of what we typically received.
Sure.
And how it was used. Okay?
They all come, everything that, we can't use it until we come before you. So it all, I could look back though and see.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other legislators have any questions? Any public comment? There being none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any against? It passes unanimously. And the last item is, first we'd like to make a motion to untable item 529, made by Vinnie Mascarello, seconded by Denise Ford. Okay, all in favor of untabling, indicate by saying aye. Any against? Okay, it's untabled unanimously. And it's 529-16 is a resolution authorizing the transfer of appropriations therefore to made within the budget for the year 2016. Okay. And
Dave Rich, Traffic and Parking Violations Agency. The board transfers to cover our contract expenses for our collection agents as well as our photo enforcement. We have exceeded the 2016 budget revenue forecasted, so therefore we've incurred additional expenses.
okay, questions? Legislator Ford has a question.
Well, considering, I understand that because of an increase in revenue, I guess more tickets, red light camera tickets, correct? So that would,
Well, it's not just the increase in the camera tickets itself, but there's been an increase also in violations issued by the various policing jurisdictions as well.
okay, so that means, so we have a greater expense, we have to give it to the vendors, correct?
Correct.
So that means because we have increased revenue. So wouldn't the increase in revenue cover the increased expense? I'm missing something.
They should, but we only budget a certain finite dollars for our collection vendors as well as our red light camera vendor. So once we, like we're now, we've now exceeded the revenues, and the revenues are based off of, and the expenses are based off the revenues.
Right.
So now since we've collected higher than anticipated revenues, we now have higher than anticipated expenses.
But how does the expenses outweigh the revenue?
It's just because the way it's budgeted.
All right, so then once you, all right, so you're taking the money from Office of Management and Budget, right? So you're going to take the money from them and you're going to pay the contractual expense to the vendors, correct?
Correct.
To the tune of $1.4 million. So when you realize all of the revenues that you're supposed to get, are you going to give this money back to the Office of Management and Budget?
For example, I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question. We budgeted, or the county budgeted $38 million in red light camera, and that includes fines as well as fees. Right now, year to date, we've collected $45.8 million. So therefore, you're looking at $7 million additional revenue.
Right.
And our contract with the photo enforcement is we pay them a certain percentage of every dollar that we collect.
Correct.
So since we've exceeded the budgeted revenue, we've actually exceeded our contracted or budget contract expense.
Meaning that you exceeded the $38 million that you budgeted by $7 million.
Yes, in revenues.
So we end up getting $7 million more dollars, okay?
Minus $1.4 million.
All right, so then is this $1.4 million that you're taking from the Office of Management and Budget, that really was money that you sent over from your revenues? Maybe this is where I'm probably missing this.
Legislative for Office of Management Budget, they just do the accounting work.
Okay, so
And
then,
so it's not coming from them, this
Okay.
is in their department.
in their department.
So they make more revenues
Okay,
within their
that's-
department, so
yeah,
they
that's
have
what I
to
was
pay.
trying to find out,
Yeah,
like,
no,
how it
OMB just does the accounting.
Okay, all right, so then it really is your revenue that you're, out of the $7 million that you collected, over the $38 million, you're taking 1.4 out of it.
Yes, just to, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Legislator Cummings was next, and then, no, I let the Cavani. One of you.
Thanks.
Ladies first.
That's okay. So this, I think that you answered the question because I had a similar line of question. Why is this coming from the budget office? Since the revenue is coming from TIFA, wouldn't TIFA be directly attached to the increased expense?
Let's say the current OMB is just our accounting. our
Right,
accountant.
I hear that, yep.
So they're the ones who manage the budget. And so the reason that this ordinance that comes down from the OMB, it really is technically TIFA that is the agency that's doing this. So they're just looking at the TIFA department, and as like an accounting firm, they're saying, well, you made more money, you got expenses, so it has to be approved by you because the budget that was approved has less revenue and also has less expense. So you're here to approve that they can essentially just pay their vendors. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it
OMB
does.
is just
but I-
our accounting, basically does the accounting, puts together the budget. They don't actually, they manage the general fund, but they themselves are not a department. I know it was confusing to me to see
Yeah.
that this comes from OMB, but OMB is the one that has to say that it's okay for them to do this. And
So
then
I
with
have
your
more of
approval.
like a technical, mechanical question. Wouldn't it make more sense to do this as a supplemental appropriation to keep it within the department? Wouldn't it be simpler that way? Less
No,
complicated?
because it's a
more
transfer of money between the revenue line to the expense line.
So you couldn't do it with a supplemental appropriation within the department?
I don't think that, no, I may not be qualified, you're right, I may not be qualified to answer that, but from what I know and understand, okay.
Andy Carsick, Budget Office. We don't usually supplementally appropriate revenue. We only change the expenses between expense codes.
Because there's a revenue.
If
going
we
here.
exceed revenue in one area, the charter doesn't require us to do any changes to that. It's only on the expense side that we have to do that with.
So could you do it as a supplemental?
You could theoretically do it if you'd like, but
Okay.
you know what I mean, it's not good practice. The charter doesn't require us to do anything on the revenue side of the budget.
Okay, so why is it not considered, I'm just curious, why is it not considered a good practice?
Well, because we're doing estimates for revenue, it's like sales tax and everything else. We don't know what the number's gonna come in precisely, so it doesn't happen that way, you know, so it just doesn't do it that way. He's exceeding his revenue. As a result of that, we have to pay a little bit more in expenses to get that money in.
Right,
That's why we
right,
need to do this, so.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Legislator Abrams.
Thank you, Chairman Dunn. Just a quick, I don't know who can answer, but this is a quick question in regards to the actual transfer itself. It says that it's to cover a shortfall in contractual expenses. Just curious what those contracts are.
That's gonna be.
Basically, the one contractor is our photo enforcement vendor, American Traffic Solutions. Again, we pay them a certain percentage, I think it's 35% of fine and penalty for every dollar that we collect, as well as our collection vendors, which is Boot and Tow, and which I think we just done an amendment on them. And the other one is our collection vendor as well for Alliance One.
So they're based off of how much they do?
Yes, they get a percentage. The way it works, just so you know, for the example for Alliance One, we add an additional collection fee, so basically it's net zero collection to, no cost to the county for collection fees, but we do have the budget for it. So we assess it, and we collect it, and then remit it back to the vendor. For photo enforcement, it is a cost, basically because the vendor provides all the materials, computer system, processing, and even the photo enforcement equipment itself.
So just to make sure I'm clear, so there's no new contracts that are being derived from this board transfer. These are all existing contracts that based off of the amount of work that they provided to the county saw that, I'm guessing we saw it on the revenue side, to go along with our expenditures in the increase in revenues that we attributed. There is a $1.4 million additional expenditure.
Correct, there's no additional new contracts.
Okay. Thank you.
I just had a quick question, just to request that you break down the actual amounts that are going to each vendor. I think that would be helpful.
Okay, I can get that to you.
Thank you.
In the future, that'd be great, thank you. Legislator Carmichael.
Hi. So this from the budget office goes to TIPA, which then goes to the vendor, right? Is that correct? So why not just write from the budget office to the vendor? Why does it have to go through TIPA? I just answered it up here. The question was, the money, it goes from the budget office to TIPA, then to the vendor. Why not just go right to the vendor from the budget office? But I hear from
I think there's a problem. We have to have the money in place, the budgetary dollars to pay the vendor first. Then what happens is the department will initiate a claim, and then it goes through the claim process within the county, that's determined by charter, and the controller is the final say, and then it comes back to the treasurer to cut the check after everything is done that way. But it's a complex process.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hands touching paper here.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions from any legislator? Any public comment? There being none, all in favor of this item indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any against? Passes unanimously. Have a motion from legislator Muscarella to adjourn, second by legislator McKenzie. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any against? Okay. Now stand adjourned. The next committee to come up is Planning and Development and the Environmental Committee. Thank you.